This video is brought to you by OKCoin Crypto Exchange, where you can buy, sell, and trade your favorite cryptocurrencies, and you don't have to pay high fees. OKCoin has very low fees, lower than many of the other crypto exchanges in the market. You can also stake your cryptocurrencies and keep 100% of the rewards. There are no fees. Other exchanges charge fees. OKCoin allows you to keep 100% of the rewards. Sign up with OKCoin, link in the description. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto channel. I hope you're doing well. With me today is Michael Wagner, the CEO and co-founder of Star Atlas. Michael, great to be speaking with you.
You as well, Tony. Great to be here.
Michael, I'm excited to speak to you because we've seen the boom of NFTs and you're doing something very interesting. And I want to go through all the different intricacies and nuances. But before we get there, let's start with your background. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yep, born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Very cool. And what did you do before founding Star Atlas?
Well, like everybody's life journey, kind of a variety of paths, but ultimately landed on a career in traditional finance. I've obtained my CFA charter, so I'm a CFA charter holder. I worked in, investment and securities analysis, portfolio management, and private and institutional wealth management.
And what was your first encounter with, was it crypto or was it straight to blockchain, NFTs? What was your first encounter with the whole space?
Yeah, I'll tie it a little bit back to both my childhood. So kind of just grew up as, hardcore computer nerd gamer with a group of friends that we called the Lanarchists. And so this was back in the 90s, and at the time broadband internet wasn't widely available. And so the way that we could engage in multiplayer gameplay and also just have a good time was to, bring our big computers over to somebody else's house and just, game all weekend, drink Mountain Dew and eat pizza. The friends that I formed during those years have remained friends. They've been lasting relationships. And back in 2013, one of those friends, Gabriel Allred, actually introduced me to the concept of crypto mining, so Bitcoin as well as crypto mining. And so given the background that I had in gaming and kind of playing with computers, building my computers, it wasn't too difficult to kind of establish these mining rigs and, super rough in milk crates, multiple GPUs. But it was just really cool. The concept really caught my attention. This idea that we could essentially create residual income streams through deploying compute power. Right. And so that was the inroad. 2013, really poor timing, to be honest. It was right in the tail end of the previous bull cycle. So the 2013 bull cycle. Mining was not profitable for very long whatsoever, but I still consider myself fortunate because it got me fascinated about the potential of the industry. And so I spent the next 2 years during the bear cycle just learning as much as I could about the industry and immersing myself in the technology and trying to understand really how we could use this technology to benefit people, myself, kind of create ventures around it, and ultimately went on to launch my first company in the space in 2016. And that's a crypto and cannabis company. It's called Tokes, has had a number of successes on its own. But, the other benefit of launching that company was that I was introduced to two of the people who went on to co-found Star Atlas with me. And so we started conceptualizing Star Atlas in 2020. And that was kind of after observing what was going on with things like DeFi, 2019 DeFi, 2020 DeFi, and then really NFTs started to take their own in 2020. And all of us being big gamers, we saw this tremendous opportunity to create something that would be transformative in the space, combining kind of all of our collective knowledge.
So you're certainly a crypto OG. I mean, you were back in the day mining. Were you mining Bitcoin or anything else, maybe Ethereum or anything like that?
I did mine Ethereum. I got in on the Ethereum ICO and started mining Ethereum on day one, which was actually pretty complicated. It was, I don't have any development skills or engineering skills myself. So navigating things like, Linux and figuring out how to compile these applications, and Ethereum in particular was pretty finicky getting it to work. But nevertheless, I did mine Ethereum. I also kind of a tip of the cap is I was one of the earliest miners on Monero, and we actually went out and sourced through a developer who was competent in assembly language. We sourced him to develop a custom miner for us, which was twice as efficient as the publicly available miner. And then we also had access to thousands of instances on AWS. So we were very early to the AWS cloud mining game with CPUs, and we were able to capture a significant amount of the hash rate on the Monero network back in 2015, I would say. Actually 2014 it was. So some really great years, really great experiences. I never mined Bitcoin because it was already into the ASIC era, and I just didn't necessarily see the value. Plus, if you look at the kind of the lifespan of that mining equipment, it's really critical that you are able to generate a profit in a very short period of time. Otherwise, the equipment essentially depreciates so quickly that you can't make money on it. And so I stuck to the GPUs. I had mining rigs set up all over my house and was literally blowing out circuit breakers left and right, and power was going off in my house all the time. And as I said, I grew up in Vegas, so for anyone who's ever mined with GPUs, you'll know that it generates a tremendous amount of heat. So not great in the summer. It's nice in the winter, though.
For sure. Wow. Like I said, you are certainly one of the OGs. I mean, mining Monero. Wow. So I have to ask, as of today, what do you have in your crypto portfolio? Do you still have Monero, Ethereum, and anything else?
Yeah, I actually have a small stash of Ethereum. I think it's still promising technology. Obviously, it has the Lindy effect, first mover advantage for smart contract platforms. The portfolio is predominantly dominated by Bitcoin. I do have a sizable amount of Cardano. I think that's a promising network, heavily vested in Solana, Monero, as you said. And, the other network that I think is really promising is Terra Luna. And so, I'm holding Luna and Anchor and Mirror, which is a cool synthetic marketplace for stock trading effectively, at least mimicking the volatility of stocks. So those are the most notable ones. I have probably 30 or 40 tokens, coins that I've been holding since forever, riding them through the various cycles. And occasionally these things hit, but those smaller ones, I kind of think of those as lottery tickets at this point. Someday they might pop 100x or 1000x, and that's your opportunity. But otherwise, they're kind of worthless.
For sure. So let's talk about Star Atlas. Tell us about what was the genesis of the idea in starting the company, and what are the services that you provide?
Yeah, well, so quick overview. Star Atlas is a space-themed, massively multiplayer online game, probably most comparable to something like EVE Online or more recently Star Citizen. The primary gameplay pillars or mechanics are centered around space exploration, territory control, political domination, and it really is kind of wrapped in this grand strategy theme. Now, where we wanted to differentiate ourselves and looking what was currently available on the market, at least for the blockchain gaming niche, is we wanted to develop this to the highest possible quality standards. So the so-called AAA quality gaming experience. This is something that is attractive to a mainstream gaming audience, of which there are 2.7 billion gamers around the world, as opposed to the rather nascent and kind of, I don't want to say really rudimentary blockchain games where it's a lot of card-based games or turn-based games. The graphics are, lower quality, pixelated, and oftentimes. And so we're actually building out in Unreal Engine 5. And so what that will deliver for us is full cinematic quality gameplay experience. And Unreal Engine 5 releases a lot of new features and upgrades over UE4 that are also going to reduce the compute requirements and GPU requirements for the players. So you get these worlds that just look absolutely realistic, and that's the gameplay experience that we wanted to build upon, and we supplemented that by incorporating blockchain. So obviously we have expertise, say subject matter experts in the crypto ecosystem, again, having launched a company and having been in the space for a long time. So we wanted to incorporate a number of concepts, the first of which is NFTs, non-fungible tokens. This delivers true asset ownership for the player. Also utilizing two crypto native assets, Atlas and Polis. Atlas is a transactional currency within the game. Polis is a governance token. It'll be the Star Atlas DAO that really mandates and controls how the game gets developed in the long term, with a lot of additional kind of mechanics worked in there that also have repercussions in the gameplay itself. The political strategy component of the game is driven by Polis token. And quick note here aside, we will actually be releasing our game economics and tokenomics document within the next 2 weeks. So definitely keep an eye out for that. A lot of people have been asking what the economics will look like, but that's coming out. But then we're also incorporating DeFi into the game. And the primary motivation for that is players are going to generate revenue. This is a play to earn model. They're going to generate revenue and income through gameplay, which will be delivered via Atlas. That is the financial reward token in the game. But they can obviously, because it's a crypto native asset, take that and either exchange it on centralized exchanges like FTX or on decentralized exchanges across the Solana ecosystem. We are building on Solana, and we can get into why, but you can liquidate that, and then you'll have this effectively asset that's sitting in your crypto wallet. But we wanted to provide players with optionality on how to deploy that capital and generate additional yield, compound yield on their earnings. And so if you're starting to build up a treasury as a player, why not deploy some of that to a liquidity pool or an AMM, right? Do some yield farming. And then one of the other concepts that we think are really promising, is that of lending pools. So being able to purchase and own assets, contribute it to a lending pool, allow other players to rent or borrow that from you, which is mutually beneficial. The person who's borrowing it, sure, pays a fee to be able to have access to it, but they have access to an asset that they might otherwise not be able to. So they can play and they can earn. On the other side of the equation is the person that owns the asset that is able to collect rent. So we actually create a true sharing economy within the metaverse. It's kind of like Airbnb, except with game assets, and everybody wins. And so those are the core blockchain mechanics. And the final part of it is just the metaverse itself, which is a complex subject, and happy to get into some more questions on that as we go.
Sure. I mean, wow, that is so fascinating, and I love that you're bringing, like, to your point, the quality to cinematic gameplay. In addition, the ability to earn income and do a variety of things with via DeFi. That's, I've been a big gamer in my history, but having a child, I haven't been able to do as much. But now hearing that I'm able to earn and be part of this ecosystem, that sounds amazing. Why did you guys choose Solano as the blockchain to build on?
Yeah, so I mean, there were a number of things. First and foremost, the tech had to be capable of delivering the features that we needed to produce a AAA quality game and also make it still an enjoyable and functional gameplay experience, right? So there's a lot of transactions that are going to be taking place within the metaverse, and transactions not necessarily in the financial sense, but excuse me, every time, say, a player makes a movement within the game, that's technically a transaction, right? That is something that gets recorded with a backend that needs to be updated throughout the network and propagated throughout the network. And so, just looking at the tech specs of Solana, capable of 50,000 transactions per second, and that's actually highly scalable depending on the amount of nodes that they have around the world. Currently, there's something like 850 nodes. We very much follow the philosophy of decentralization, and in terms of Generation 3 blockchains, having 850 nodes on, there's a unique algorithm, a proof of history algorithm on Solana, but you can think of it kind of like proof of stake. Amongst the proof of stake networks, one of the downsides is that you tend to get these really concentrated node structures, and you don't have a great degree of decentralization. And so that existed with Solana. Sub-second finality on transactions, which means low latency. Again, if you're a gamer, the last thing you want to have to deal with is lag, and low transaction costs. 1/100th of a penny per transaction. So again, if you have millions and millions of players playing and every single one of their actions is some type of event that needs to be recorded on chain, then you need low transaction costs. Otherwise, you won't be able to operate the game. Sure. And so that's from the tech side. From the ecosystem side, though, we just saw how much promise the team had. And, you know, one of the kind of core pieces of credibility in my mind was the fact that FTX and Alameda, you know, the whole group with SBF, they came in and created Project Serum. Well, he and a number of other parties created Project Serum, which is the decentralized exchange that lives on Solana. We saw that as a huge advantage as well, because we had all of these DeFi features that we wanted to build. But, you know, just seeing that support, we could see the potential of Solana and wanted to get involved with kind of the network, right? The club. What club do you want to be involved in? And we saw that as very promising. And you know, and beyond that, we also saw that we were kind of first movers. We were very early with Solana, talking to them, you know, mid to fourth quarter of last year, and there were probably only 20 projects on the entire network. And now I'll probably misquote the number, but I would say it's over 400 projects that are operating on Solana. So we definitely feel that we made the right choice in going with Solana because of all of the tech features, because of the amount of innovation going on, and because of the you know, the feature set that's available to us.
Sure. So you also have some really great partnerships. I mean, U.S. Space Force, and with some celebrities and so forth. Can you tell us about the various partnerships and how those came about?
Sure. A lot of the ones you just mentioned, those came through our Rebirth campaign. And so we formally announced the project, I want to say January 6th or maybe January 9th of this year. We kind of went through a round of private sales of tokens, and then that led us up to planning for an April 24th launch of an event that we called Rebirth Genesis of a Metaverse. Now, this is a digital art campaign, but again, looking at ways to innovate, we actually enhanced the digital art experience with augmented reality first on what we called posters. We also worked with a number of mainstream producers and musicians like Bassjackers, like Blondish, Swaco the Child, Ricky Desktop. And we had Deadmau5 produce a track for us on the final poster. And Armstrong came up amongst the middle of that, but the Rebirth campaign itself was a 14-poster, 14-week campaign. We had a really unique economic model behind it where it was exponentially priced. The poster started at $64. The last poster was $262,000. The entire purchase price of the posters was $526,000. And we actually succeeded in selling 4 complete sets, as well as selling over 10,000 posters of the first one, which naturally tapered off as we got into the more expensive posters, but that was also by design. We wanted to be inclusive of everyone. We figured that a $64 poster would be approachable by almost anyone. But we also wanted to cater to the whales, the people who maybe have been in crypto or just have disposable income and could see the future potential value of the underlying collectible itself. And then the final component of it was that we actually included as bonuses game assets through various reward tiers, of which there were 6 reward tiers. And you had to own all of the posters up to that reward tier from 1 through X. And in doing so, you got effectively numerical value and assets in return for the poster price. And so just by way of example, on the first poster, $64, players were expected to receive something in the neighborhood of $58 of approximate value in game assets, right? So the poster was almost free. You're kind of pre-purchasing game assets. But we do sincerely believe that the artistic value and the collectible value of these posters is not to be ignored, because if we are successful in attracting millions, hundreds of millions, or even potentially billions of users into the metaverse, then people will look back at what we were doing in this early stage and want to capture a piece of that. And so that's how we perceive and present the posters today. Now that campaign closed July 24th. And, but in the middle, we also had this opportunity to work with US Space Force, as you mentioned. And so this was really cool. US Space Force via a Falcon 9 SpaceX rocket, was launching a satellite, a GPS satellite, into orbit. And this was named after Neil Armstrong. And right. So we created an exclusive poster, and this was in collaboration directly with the U.S. Space Force and the Neil Armstrong estate to kind of memorialize this event that happened in the world. And the other reason why that's important is because the lore and backstory of Star Atlas itself is actually derived in our modern day. And so this is not some alternative universe. This is actually our version of future of humanity in the year 2620, but based on the real world today. And so, yeah, I mean, just amazing collaboration. Really cool that we got to work with the Neil Armstrong estate and Space Force and SpaceX on this event.
That's amazing. So for the folks who are listening or watching this video, what would be their next steps if they wanted to participate? Can you walk us through that? And if they wanted to go be part of the metaverse?
Sure. We actually have a really big month, so it's an exciting time for us to be chatting. We just rolled out earlier this week, Wednesday, actually, we rolled out full buy-sell capabilities and full integration of a DEX marketplace within our gaming portal. So anyone who had purchased one of our posters would be familiar with the user interface, which will ultimately transition into a mini game interface. Now, we're concurrently developing out a web app mini game that will deliver a lot of the gameplay pillars and features, as well as the financial rewards, but just in a reduced quality experience, I guess I would say, reduced quality in the sense of graphical quality, and that's relative to what we're also producing in Unreal Engine. So we have the mini game we're building in Unreal Engine right now, which is going to take a bit longer. You're a gamer, games like Cyberpunk, for example, 7-year development cycle, right? And then there was still disappointment once it actually launched. And so what we don't want to do is make everybody wait 7 years for us to release a game. And so we're actually producing on very iterative schedules where the game is not going to be complete, but we're at least releasing content regularly and expanding the universe. So our first step is this mini game. Now, we've released the DEX features so people can actively trade posters right now. And actually, there's still time for those interested to purchase posters on the secondary markets in advance of our snapshot. And we're actually going to have an update to that snapshot date coming out shortly. But the snapshot will take a look at anybody's wallet balances. And based on that balance and the amount of posters they have, they'll get these in-game rewards. So still time to trade on the markets. In the middle of the month, we're going to be releasing our game economics and tokenomics white paper. So people will be able to understand how they're able to derive value from the metaverse. That's going to lead into our launchpad strategy, which does include an IEO as well as 2 satellite launchpads. And finally, in conjunction with that, we're actually launching a new version of our website. We're also releasing a cinematic teaser trailer, and that kind of leads us up to our Galactic Asset offering at the end of the month or early September, as well as the initial version of the mini game. So people will be able to register their account, view leaderboards, see all of their assets on full display, and shortly thereafter, they'll be able to start engaging in gameplay in the mini game and start earning.
Wow. Certainly a huge roadmap ahead, and I'm excited to see those updates. So obviously, you see the potential in the future of this and the trend of folks participating more on, as far as the folks who are interested in gaming, tell us about, the importance of like building the in-game economies and things like that. And with the merging of crypto and blockchain and DeFi and NFTs, it seems like we're all going to be in the metaverse to some degree. What do you see as far as trends and adoption of this moving forward?
Yeah, it's kind of wild because we started to conceptualize this, mid last year, and I don't want to sound too hipster, but nobody was really talking about the metaverse then, and I don't know if it's that collective consciousness or what, but now we're seeing major tech companies making announcements. Obviously, Facebook made their announcement, Epic raised $1 billion to build the metaverse, which we're actually quite fond of because Epic is the creator of Unreal Engine, and so we think that there's probably nice synergy there between what they're doing and what we're ultimately going to be doing. But there's kind of like two core pieces to what we're doing. First of which is the game has to be fun.
Right.
Bottom line, right? If the game's not fun, doesn't matter really what the financial incentives are. People won't want to play it for a long time. And what we're trying to create is this universe that lives on into perpetuity and in parallel with reality. It's a digital reality, but one in which there's limitless opportunity. And so the game has to be fun, first of all, but the economy is really the centerpiece of the metaverse, and it needs to be open, needs to be accessible, it needs to be it needs to evolve based on player and creator contributions. I can speak more about how we intend to transition the Star Atlas metaverse from a centralized developed company, which it is today, into a fully decentralized organism, really. Through the DAO, wherein it would even be possible for players and owners of the governance token to be able to vote us out as having the monopoly on asset creation within the game. And we're fully in favor of this, right? Because we believe that that's the only way the metaverse can live on forever, is everybody has to be able to impact the way that it works. Nevertheless, it's incredibly complex because the economic system that lives in the game is pretty closely related to the way that economies work in the real world, right? Sure. I mean, there's tremendous amount of variables, and over time, we're going to be giving up a lot of control to other individuals to be able to influence how that works. So, as I said, the economy is the center point. We're putting a tremendous amount of work right now, which will be demonstrated in the game econ paper and in the tokenomics paper. But ultimately, this needs to be kind of circular. It can't be an extractive economy, which is what a lot of play to earn games are today, where you have this subsidy, right? This inflation or emission schedule of tokens being released into the game. But if you don't provide the ability for people to create value within the metaverse, and it's purely people extracting value out through the subsidy, then that is a formula that will fail over time. Right. Sure. And so that's, again, we're starting with a point where we can incentivize users, we can attract the user base, but then turn it over so that other people can actually create opportunities for themselves and also create value for the metaverse. And in doing so, that will actually increase the overall GDP of the metaverse and therefore, create this circular economy where new capital is flowing in, also capital flowing out. And this all operates in a decentralized fashion where it's completely seamless. To transcend the metaverse, take the capital earned out, exchange it on decentralized exchanges or centralized exchanges, and back into the real world, right? So you need this seamless experience between virtual reality or digital reality and meat space reality.
That's amazing. Such an exciting time, and I'm excited to see you as things roll out on your end. In addition to the items you mentioned that are in the pipeline, is there anything else we should know about Star Atlas for 2021? I know there's probably certain things waiting for PR release, but anything you can give us a hint on?
Those are the really major events that are up and coming. I'm not at my usual backdrop because of I have been the whole team has just been gas to the floor, pedal to the floor for the last 7 months. I feel like I've been gas to the pedal to the floor for the last 5 years between the various companies. And so that's why I'm spending a little time working remotely from the Yucatan. But the only other thing that I would kind of allude to right now is that there is some possibility that we actually have an initial Unreal Engine environment that is able to be interacted with by players by the end of the year. So I don't want to overpromise on dates. You know how fickle the community can be if we promise something. So it's possible, but no promises.
Cool. So I want to switch gears a bit and talk about the crypto market as a whole, and obviously with your experience going back to 2013. I don't know if you can give price predictions, but do you have a Bitcoin price predictions? Do you see us still in a bull market, and maybe we have another run up this year?
From obviously I have the analyst background, but I don't deploy that a lot in the crypto space. You can't really use conventional. Well, actually, that's changing. You couldn't historically use conventional financial models to really determine intrinsic value of things like cryptos, because there were no, dividends or cash flows or anything that you would typically use to determine that value of a security, for which tokens are not, right, in most cases. And so with all that being said, mine is more of a kind of a gut check sentiment standpoint. I do think we're still in a bull cycle. I think a lot of what's going on right now is just noise. I think we'll have a strong end of the year. Now, if you talk to a lot of the technical analysts, I know we're kind of like right on the line. Very possible that we enter into another bear cycle, but it just doesn't feel that way to me. So I do think that we're going to have a strong finish to the year. I think we could get very close to 100K, if not break through it.
Let's talk about U.S. crypto regulations. A lot of dialogue and discussions happening right now, especially around the infrastructure bill. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts around that, and maybe your perspective? It seems like maybe the old guard is trying to stifle crypto a bit because it threatens the traditional financial markets. I don't know, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with that philosophy. I definitely think they feel threatened right now. With that said, having been in the crypto space for so long, I don't dissuade regulation. I do think that it's a positive move. Mm-hmm. I've avoided narrowly many scams, and there's still many scams that are perpetrated. And 27 was one of the biggest years of those. And I've obviously lost money because of projects that overpromised and just never delivered as well. And so, to that end, I think it's a positive move to ensure that we are protecting people from fraudulent behavior. However, at the same time, and this is kind of true of venture capital as well, I don't think that we should implement the same systems wherein people don't have the opportunity to speculate as long as they kind of understand what they're doing, right? And so crypto is this huge opportunity for people to change their financial position enormously, right? And this is extremely disruptive technology, and I think everybody should have access to that. So, my insight right now for what's going on, based on kind of the latest rhetoric, is that they're overstepping. I think it's too harsh, but it's a system that is incredibly powerful and is going to be very difficult to fight. So the other side of that coin, though, is that the U.S. in particular, I think, is just disincentivizing people to remain in the United States, by implementing these types of structures. And we're actually seeing, El Salvador first, and I can't remember what second country just, declared that they're going to allow crypto payments nationally as legal tender.
I think Uruguay, I think it was.
Okay, yeah, sounds about right. But other countries are starting to see this as an opportunity to attract people. It's going to attract capital inflows, and those capital inflows will lead to infrastructure development in those countries. People that are looking to escape the old regime, that old guard you referred to, and flow into the places where innovation is possible. And so the U.S. right now, with the way that they're laying out, their support of the various bills, is they're stifling innovation, and other geographic regions will take advantage of that fact.
Yeah, and and to your point, right? We do have to protect people, but there's a balance there. You don't want to kill the innovation and drive companies out. What are your thoughts on, and I know we touched a bit on it, but NFTs as a market, we've seen, maybe it was in a bubble phase, right? Some really high valuations for artwork, but it seems like the technology is absolutely here to stay. And do you see, that people moving more towards that? I grew up with comic books and trading cards, so it's still a bit of a foreign concept, even though I love crypto. What are your thoughts on NFT in the future?
Well, I would say, a little bit conflicted. One from the pure collectible side, I think we did experience a bit of a bubble, you know, which was kind of fantastic because we got to introduce this concept to artists and creators from all over the world, and they got to capture some of the value from their creations for which they've never been able to do in the past, at least not in the capacity that they did through the boom of NFT collectibles. On the flip side of that coin, where I think the real future is in utility-driven NFTs, which is what we're focused on in game, right? These assets that actually can produce some value back in return for the player. And, you know, just one other component of that being a longtime gamer myself and spending probably tens of thousands of hours in video games through my life, you know, we're changing the formula from being entertainment and escapism driven, but also kind of financially extractive from the player, right? The game studio pulls capital from the player. We're changing that formula to essentially create it, to modify it from an expense-oriented purchase to, I don't want to say investment-oriented purchase, but it is an asset that actually retains value, that if they decide later they don't want to use that, they can actually resell it back into the economy to some other player, right? And I think that's a net positive for gamers. And I think what we're doing with our own financial model is we've identified entirely different paths of revenue that traditional gaming studios are not even looking at. And so we're still able to make money and build a game, and yet we can return and enable the player to retain their value and capture income off of the time that they're spending in the game. It's very much a win-win situation. And I think that is the appropriate path forward. And I think we're going to see that take much more traction. And in fact, you know, Axie Infinity is absolutely blowing up. So kudos to those guys. You know, they have something like 650,000 daily active users right now. And the growth has been exponential, parabolic. And, you know, I think that trend is just at the beginning.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And man, I totally love the concept of what you guys are building, and the ability to earn. I think that's a huge incentive, right? Because you're having fun, but you're also earning at the same time. That's pretty amazing. So I want to wrap it up here with some quick rapid fire questions, such as, what's your favorite food?
That's a tough one. I could probably eat sushi every day.
Awesome. Favorite musician or band?
So I don't really have one. I tend to listen to a lot of electronic music. I wouldn't necessarily say I have like a favorite DJ or anything, but let me just say I've been getting into this synthwave kind of 80s retro techno lately. So that's kind of that's what's been on my playlist most recently.
Awesome. Favorite movie?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to take a hard pass. I can't.
It's a hard one. Yeah.
I don't know on that one.
Favorite book?
Yeah. So just finished reading Snow Crash, Neil Stephenson, seminal novel on the metaverse, you know, written like 1984, something like that. And I have to say, it's probably right at the top of my list now. I think it was a phenomenal novel and recommended to everyone.
And finally, when you're not working, what are you doing for fun as a hobby? Gaming?
What is fun? I haven't heard that term in a long time. As I said, we've been grinding pretty hard. I do like to be active outdoors. I rock climb, I cycle. I like to kind of tinker with electronics, and of course, gaming's on the list as well. But haven't been able to do much of that lately, unfortunately.
For sure. Well, appreciate all the hard work, and you're building something so cool, and I'm excited to see all the different features rolled out. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us today, and certainly want to hear back from you and love to have you back on as things progress.
It's an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate the time, Tony.